Um, yeah, maybe we'll let's just close that. Hang on 1 second. Someone will still come. We're learning chapter 23, Mitzvah Hashem. Before we start, I just want to make a dedication for Shlema, for someone who really a very special person, David Resnick. So those of you know him, has been very sick the last couple of months, and I was studying with him in the Kollel program at Ayelet Shaffer, and he's been working for years for the OK. He's been a mashgiach kashrut, came in Aliyah, and then unfortunately got very ill. So I want to dedicate the learning that is for Shlema, and we should see him out of hospital very, very soon. And really, very. Hello.
Oh, you need to wish this gentleman a mazel tov.
Yes. We at the same time, without missing a beat, we have to wish Ironi's a very wonderful mazel tov for the spectacular wedding that we had the privilege of attending. It was really beautiful. Again, it's always to do something like that in Israel is I think today is not just a tremendous achievement; it's a big zchut. It's a real merit because we heard shiurim over Shavuos, and one of the speakers was talking about the nevuah of Zechariah that you'll see in Yerushalayim not only the youngsters but the old people, everyone. It will be populated and it will be full of joy, kol sason, kol simcha, what we say at the wedding. So we're living that at the moment, and therefore to contribute to that is a very special merit. All right, we are looking at chapter 23. Last time, chapter 21, 22, we did 2 chapters, and we spoke about a gentleman called Doeg, who I do not want to talk about anymore at this point, although he does come up again. For those who are interested, the online on YU Torah, I've got 2 shiurim on the Book of Ruth, where I talk about Doeg, but in the context of the Book of Ruth. He was a big troublemaker in his day and doubted the yichus, the pedigree of David, and made a lot of problems. And he claimed that Ruth was never Jewish, and therefore part of the whole idea of the Book of Ruth is to make a statement. Shmuel and Rabbi wrote the Book of Ruth to say to the world, enough. We know that David is Jewish because Ruth is Jewish, and it's certainly an interesting take on the whole Book of Ruth to see that it's in the context of essentially what we were learning here. But anyway, I don't want to go back to the Book of Ruth, Mr. Hashem. That will be, we put that to the side at the moment and come back to it in due course. But look at this chapter 23, Appel. I just want to say 1 or 2 things before we start. I haven't spoken about I always talk about it was a movie many years ago, The Madness of King George. So some people call it The Madness of King Saul. Shaul HaMelech, once he lost the kingship, was very, you say in Yiddish, zerflogen. Zerflogen means all over the place. And there's no question about it that his behavior is very erratic. And he's spending a lot of time, instead of doing what he should be doing, which is protecting the Jewish people, he's spending a lot of time actually trying to get at David, who he sees as a danger to the Malchut. He sees David as a rebel that in his mind. Was David a rebel? No, not 1 iota. David was so loyal to the king, as we'll see when we go through the next 2 or 3 chapters, something extraordinary. But there's a lot of discussion what was going on in the mind of King Saul. Was he going mad? The answer is clearly not. The reason people argue that, Shur Bachrach, one of the very good writers on Tanakh, who was a teacher at the Michlala for many years, he argued that he couldn't have gone mad because he's got thousands of people following him. With all due respect, if the king was going crazy, they would lock him up and that would be the end of it, as they did with George III. However, the argument is made, counter-argument, that it's still the king. So if he's got this mushugas that he wants to go and chase after David, people would follow the king. However, there are other arguments which are very significant. Some say that he was a victim of what the Greeks call tragedy, the difference between what was and what could have been, and A lot of people bring in different definitions to describe what happened to King Saul. The explanation which Rabbi gives, which I think makes to me most sense, is that he was suffering from loss. What did he lose? He'd lost that connection to God. He was a godly man. He was a very special man, very tall, very, very connected, very, very spiritual. And that connection to God went away when he failed his mission with Amalek. He didn't kill them, didn't wipe them out. Not an easy mission to complete. He didn't complete it properly. And as a consequence, he forfeited the kingship. And that drove him to despair. And not only that, but when he was connected with David, remember David came to play the music and tried to calm him down, and music therapy, even in the Bible, unbelievable. And the reality of it is that when Saul saw that David was so inspired, was so spiritual, so connected to God, and he realized that what he had, Saul had gone on to, had transferred onto David. And therefore David went up and Saul went down. And this turned his mind. He basically went into states of depression. And we know from today, there's a lot of discussion about mental illnesses and all these sort of things, which Lo Aleinu, we know there's a lot of it around. Certainly in terms of PTSD and all these sort of things going on in the country here, which are very serious. The reality is that this could explain very quickly why Shaul was up. 1 minute he was connected. You'll see he even has a conversation with David, which is so emotional. It's unbelievable. We're going to come to that, I think, in the next chapter. But even in this chapter, we have already an interaction, I think. And at the same time, within a minute, he's down in the dumps again, and he's chasing David, and he's looking to kill him. So this is the explanation that Rabbi Bachar gives, that it's a spiritual malaise. He's unwell because of what happened to him, that he lost that extreme, intense spiritual connection to God. He became like a Novi. He wasn't a Novi in the sense of Isaiah and Jeremiah, but he was a Novi in the sense of receiving that kind of spiritual elation. Like you see the guys Thursday night used to be at the bottom of Ben Yehuda, the Brazlovers. They all danced around in a circle and was sameach, everybody in Yerushalayim. It was really something to go and see. I hope they still do it. I haven't been there on a Thursday night. But, that kind of going beyond, above and beyond, they become spiritually imbued. Right, and this was Shaul's loss, and Rabbi goes to a long explanation. But it helps us to understand a little bit of what's going to be coming up, because we'll see that there are moments when Shaul gets clarity. And when he gets clarity, it's like somebody told me once, he said he compares it to never someone who's suffering from dementia. There is a moment of clarity, and as they say, the shutters go up, and that person is back and talking to you as if they you know them and they know you, and then boom, the shutters go down again. And I think we've all seen this and experienced it and know about it at least. And it's one of those things that happens to Shaul. One moment the shutters are up, you'll see he connects to David and he cries and David cries, and they have this very emotional interaction. And then boom, shutters go down and he's focused again on one thing, to kill David. We'll come to all of this in due course, but I wanted to mention that because I hadn't done so till now, and just to make it clear where we're going with Shaul. Now, if you want to claim that he's mad and you want to go in that direction, you could argue it, and I'm not going to go further in that topic, but there's something to be said. I think I wrote about it a bit in the book. If you have the book at home, have a look and see what I put down there. I remember now in terms of Shaul. Look at 23. Unbelievable story. David had to run away from Nov. Nov was destroyed by Doeg, who followed the request, the command of the king. David runs away. He has with him one of the Kohanim who survived the massacre, someone called Eviatar. And Eviatar, as you will see, not only survives but takes all the appliances, all the pertinences of the Kohen Gadol. So he has the Urim V'Tumim, he has the breastplate, he has the clothing. He's managed to salvage the whole thing, which is interesting because you'll see it becomes relevant later on. So listen to this, follow this, because it is truly an unbelievable story. So they told David the following: so remember, David's running away, right? And he's being chased by Shaul. And in the middle of all of this, who pops up their ugly heads? Who appears on the scene? The Philistines, yet again. They don't go away. and they're in a place called Keilah, right? I always argue chapter 23, it's the bus ride from here to Eilat. Okay, when you're on that bus, if you've got a tour guide, he will point out to you, oh, this is what they used to call Keilah, this is what they call the Midbar Zif. Yeah, you're on the way down to Eilat and you pass all of these places. This is where this is all happening. If you're ever on a bus to Eilat, it happens. So listen to this. They're fighting. The Plishtim are coming to a place called Keilah. The Hema Shosima to Granot. And what they're doing is they're destroying the granaries. They're destroying the places of storing the grain. This is a big problem because you haven't got food. You won't have bread. People are not going to be happy. Vayishal David. Now, here comes something interesting. David uses what is called Urim v'Tumim. Just to explain very briefly what that is. The Kohen Gadol had what we would call today instant messaging with God, right? He had, or WhatsApp with God. I don't like to, maybe instant messaging is probably a better way of describing it. What the Kohen Gadol wore was a breastplate with stones. All the roads around here, Pateda and Odem and all, it's all the stones that the Kohen Gadol wore. And those stones had engraved on them the tribes. Right? Yehuda, Shimon, Levi, whatever. And those letters on the stones, when there was a question which they had to ask God, and normally this was something of major importance that the king would be allowed to ask God. And this is a whole discussion what's going to happen here in this chapter. David is not the king, but is the king elect because he was anointed already. So he's going to use the Urim v'Tumim, this special connection hotline to heaven in order. That sounds like a good program for TV. Hotline to heaven. Wow. Or late night calling. Hotline to heaven. That sounds great. I must write that down. So so David is now going to use this particular hotline in order to connect to God. He doesn't know what to do. On the one hand, this is a good Jewish discussion. On the one hand, he's being chased by Shaul. So Shaul should do the business, right? You got to deal with the Plishtim. On the other hand, he's David, and David does not shirk responsibility. He knows that he's a warrior. He knows that he should fight the Plishtim, and as a consequence, he needs to get involved. What do I do? Because if he gets involved, right, he's in a quandary because Shaul can catch him, and if Shaul catches him, Shaul is determined to kill him because he sees David as a rebel against the king. So what does David do? So look at chapter 23, verse 2. Vayishal David b'Hashem le'imor. He asks God. Can't get a straight answer than that. You're going to ask Hashem, Haylech v'iketi b'plishtim ha'ele. Do I go and smite the plishtim? Do I go and do what I always do, which is come along with my sword and bail the people out? Vayom Hashem el David. This is really unbelievable. He's getting a direct answer, dialogue. Right? We love this concept. There's a book by, forgotten, I think it was the author of the Shulchan Aruch, Magid Meishorim, if I'm right, where he had a chavrusa every night with an angel. So he claimed. And he wrote down what the angel taught him in the morning. Right? So that was sort of getting a direct line, certainly almost a direct line with God. This is 500 years ago in Israel, in Tzfat. But it's Tzfat, so we know Tzfat's always a bit out of the box. But generally speaking, this direct dialogue, this direct contact is very unique. But Vayom Hashem al David, God spoke to David. Lech v'ikita b'plishtim v'oshatat kila. You got to save this place. Kila. It's being destroyed by the plishtim, and you've got to go and save Keilah. That's the answer. So that's very nice. David is all gung ho, as we say. But what about the men? He's got a whole bunch of merry men, as we call them, and they're all joined him for all different reasons. Very disenchanted bunch of people, right? Who knows? They went to the Misra Panim and they had a bad time. I don't know what happened to them. And you'll see what happens. Gimel. Vayomer anshe David elav hinei anachnu po b'Yehuda Yirayim. We're petrified, right? We're with you, David, and we support you, but we're not going to go to war because we're also part of the rebellion in the eyes of the king. Saul will kill us. And therefore, even if we go to Keilah to deal with the Plishtim, it's not going to be good for us. That was their complaint. So David has to go back to ask question number 2. And it makes sense. David doesn't do anything without having this immediate response from God. He's a very, very godly person. Unbelievable. And he had reason to be because God spoke to him, right? This is something which we shouldn't take for granted. It's very interesting. So, Pasuk Dalet, Vayosefo David lishol b'Hashem. He had another question. V'yaneu Hashem, second response. Vayomer kum reit ke'ilah. And again, he's told, go down to Ke'ilah, ki ani noten et plishtim yodecha. Go. David, don't worry. And of course, he did this in order to get the men of his group. He got the men of the group in order to be more comforted, to be more confident that they need to go to war. So he went through the same question twice in order to give them chizuk. He wanted to give them strength, the people who were with him. Amazing. And David understands the human condition. He really gets it. He really understands. There's a lot to say about David. David is I always spoke about the King David fan club at YU, which they should have had. They never had such a thing, but I was always keen to start it. He's an amazing man. He really is an amazing person. Pasuk Hey, Vayelech David v'anashav Ke'ilah. So they went to Ke'ilah. They went to this place. Vayilochem ba'plishtim, and they fought the Plishtim. Vayinhaget miknehem, and they took away their cattle. So the rabbis asked the obvious question, why would the Philistines come with cattle? They're coming to war. You don't bring animals to war. So the answer is that David not only fought the Plishtim, but he even chased them back to where they were down south, right, Kiryat Gat and beyond, and he managed to get their animals as well as spoils of war. So David was doing a good job because if they lose their animals, they're not coming back in a hurry, right? If you think about it, it's really very smart. And what did he do? He gave them a big shmais. He really hit them. David et yoshvei Ke'ilah. He saved the dwellers of Ke'ilah. So if we now have what we call a straw poll of the men of Ke'ilah, and we ask them the following question: would you give up David to the king of Israel, Saul, if he comes and chases David? The answer should be not in a month of Sundays. He saved our tuchuses. He saved us. He really did save us from what was otherwise a complete destruction. And the men of Ke'ilah don't follow that logic. Question is why? Think about what happened in Nov, and the answer is pretty obvious. What happened in Nov? When the king heard that Nov had saved David, boom. Next thing you know, the 85 Kohanim are killed. If Ke'ilah comes over to King Saul as being yet again another place which harbored David, boom. They're worried that the same thing will happen to Ke'ilah that happened to Nov. Unbelievable. I mean, the dynamics here are really extreme. So the men of Ke'ilah, instead of showing appreciation to David, unfortunately going completely the other direction. This feels a little bit like what we've experienced in the last 10, 12 years, saving the lives of prominent Palestinian, come Hamas, come you name it. The evil gets worse and worse. We give them life. What do they give us in return? Death. It's the most unbelievable thing. It's counterintuitive. It goes against logic. It goes against decency. But the problem is that we have a story here where the men of Ke'ilah, I wouldn't say it's the same dilemma, because on the one hand, they recognize what David did, but on the other hand, they realize that the king is out to get David and anyone who protects David. So this is where the whole situation gets a little bit complicated. But listen to this. Pasuk Vav. Vayehi bivroach Evyatar ben Achimelech el David Ke'ilah. This guy Evyatar, who was the son of Achimelech, was the Kohen Gadol in Nov, had run away to Ke'ilah. Ephod Yorabi Yodo, and he brought the ephod. So in case you were wondering where David had access to the ephod, to the Urim V'Tumim, to ask God, this is where it came from. It came from Evyatar. It's almost in brackets, this passage. You know, when Shmuel is writing this down, he sort of wants to explain to you, in case you were wondering how they got hold of this stuff, which was in Nob, which is miles away from Ke'ilah, right? You know, you've been on the bus for an hour and a half going down to Eilat. You can't just get off the bus and go back to near Yerushalayim to get the ephod or whatever it was. It's a long way, even by bus. So the reality is that, no, what happened was that Evyatar brought it. Now, of course, if there's a big battle going on and David is saving the day, then even without internet, even without instant messaging of our day, they still heard about it, and Shaul heard about it. So now you've got Shaul coming into the picture. Listen to this, Pasuk Zion. It's an unbelievable story. Vayugad Shaul ki ba David ke'ilah. He heard, Shaul heard, Saul had heard that David had gone to Ke'ilah. Vayomer Shaul nikar oto Elokim biyadi. May God hand him over. He made a tefillah. He said, I want Hashem to hand him over to me. Ki nizgar lavo be'ir delatayim berir. What was special about Ke'ilah? It must have been some sort of wall around it, and they could lock the gates at night. David was in the town, had saved the city. Saul sent a message, lock the city up. If you lock up the city, then you've captured David. He can't get out. His men are stuck. He's stuck. And Saul is coming to kill David. It's pretty scary. And David is freaked out, right? As you will see in a minute. Pasuk Chet. Vayishama Shaul et kol ha'am lemilchama l'redet ke'ilah. And the contrast is shocking because David is worried about Am Yisrael. Shaul is worried about David. It's very striking. And it's sad. You feel the sense of, number one, frustration on the mind of David, and number two, the sense of disappointment that we have about Shaul. Although, again, can we blame him if he has some sort of limitation, some sort of mental situation which he's trying to cope with? I mean, can't blame him, but you feel disappointed. Why should he focus on David when they've got this whole problem with the Plishtim? And, if they would work together, they would get rid of the problem probably in very quick time, but they didn't. So anyway, in the meantime, he's coming down to Ke'ilah. Latsur el David, the El Anashav, he's going to besiege David and the men. And of course, Saul is coming with probably much more. David has about 600 people with him. Saul, we're told, has over 3,000 with him. And it's just a question of besieging them and conquering them. This is the situation. It's pretty bad. Listen to this. Pasuk 10. Vayeda David ki alav Shaul macharish hara. And of course, from his discussions with Yonatan in previous chapters, he knows Saul has got one thing in his mind. Even though macharish, he hasn't announced it loudly, it's quiet, but it's nevertheless, it's to do evil. Vayomer Leviatar kohen hagisha ephod. Third time, I've got to speak to God. Are the people of Ke'ilah, where I am now trapped in the city, are they going to open the gates to Shaul, or are they going to let me out? Because it's either or, right? I don't know what the men of Ke'ilah are actually going to do in this situation. Unbelievable story. And he wants to know from Hashem. So he'll say to me, wait a minute, Hashem can say, yes, they'll hand him over. What about free choice? Right? That you get it. If I wanted to go in that direction and go into the whole discussion of free will versus predetermination, this is a very interesting chapter to have that discussion. Because if you think about it, God is going to tell David one answer, but the men of Ke'ilah, they still have free choice to do what they want. God never tells the people what to. God encourages you to do what to do when it comes to Torah, but it's never a command in terms of free choice. But again, something for you to think about, the question of free choice and predetermination. But again, maybe it'll come up again later. Pasuk Yud. Vayomer David, but Hashem Elokei Yisrael, God, the Lord of Israel, Shema Avtecha Ki Mevakesh Shaul Lavo Ke'ilah. I have heard, your servant has heard that Shaul is coming, the Shachet La'ir Bavori, to destroy the city. And David is devastated because the last thing David wants to be responsible for is Nov number 2. He had enough with Nov number 1, and he was so devastated about that that the city was destroyed essentially because of the fact they harbored the king elect, they harbored David, that he doesn't want to be responsible for another massacre. And he knows the king is in such a volatile state, this is what he'll probably do. It's mind-blowing. All of this is mind-blowing. The way that this story plays out and the characters and the way that they're behaving, it's really scary. It sort of puts a whole question mark on kingship all over again. If this is what kingship boils down to, massacre after massacre, is it really worth it? We're waiting for the King Mashiach, by the way, so we're going to have to deal with kingship all over again. Look at the mess that they made in England recently with a certain gentleman, part of the royal family, and it does beg the question. I don't know, is it such a great blessing? But whatever. Well, we've got to think about these things. But listen to this. Pasuk Yudala. David wants to know what to do. He's now trapped. So he says, Hayazgiruni bale ki'ila biyado. Hayered Shaul kasher shamav dechos. He asked two questions, two for the price of one. And what does he ask? He asks, number one, will the men of Ke'ilah hand me over? And the second thing is whether Shaul is coming in the first place. Because he doesn't know whether Shaul is actually going to arrive or not. Now you think about it, the question's in reverse order. He should have asked, is Shaul coming and are the men going to hand me over? And what happens? The answers come at him in the proper order. Hashem lekeso hagedna lavdecha. He asks Hashem to give him an answer. And vayoma Hashem yered. The first question, or the second question, becomes the first answer. Because the second question was, is Shaul coming? So God said to him, Yered, Yud Reish Daled, those letters lit up. And he knew that's what it said, that God said to David, yeah, he's coming. But he's answering the second question first. Right, which the rabbis make a big Rashi brings this and says that David made a mistake here, and he's teaching us when this is a good pedagogics, whatever the word is. To be a pedagogue, you've got to know how to set up a lesson, to ask them the questions in order. Don't confuse the students. And David is being told a lesson. If you ask the questions, ask them in the right order, so that you get responded to in the right order. It's an interesting thing. Very much a side issue, but Rashi brings this as a kind of lesson. David is being a little bit criticized for this, even in the middle of what's going on. You'd bet. David, will they hand me over? Which was his first question. Now he repeats again. Will we be handed over to the men of Shaul? On the hand of Shaul, yeah, they're going to do it. And David is devastated. Because again, rightly so, he saved them from an absolute disaster. They would have had no bread for the winter. They would have all starved to death, especially if they're away from Yerushalayim and they're down south in the middle of nowhere, in the desert. What would they have eaten? They would have had nothing. And yet, when the question comes back and he's told that the men of Ke'ilah are going to make a problem, he has to accept it. And as we'll see, it becomes even more complicated in a minute. Pasuk Yud Gimel. He's gone from, 400? He's now got 600 men with him. How does he feed those guys? Where does he, he's responsible to keep them, as they say, together, body and soul. I used to do summer camp in America, and we had a wonderful gentleman there who every day he took a branch which was 6 foot high, and he would go wandering off into the forest. Right? This is maybe 12 years ago. So I asked him once, I said, why do you do that? Why do you go wandering off into the forest? Like, it was in the Berkshires, very nice part of America. So he said to me, you should know, he said, I was in the Bilski group. Bilski, if you've seen the movie Defiance, you'll know all about it. There was a group that managed to set up a Jewish commune, or whatever it was, in the middle of the forest. And he was one of the guys. I mean, who knew? And one of the things he'd learned is how to survive in the forest, how to find berries and how to find things to eat. And I think they even made weddings, an unbelievable group. And to that day, I mean, I don't think he's alive anymore. To that day, he always made a point of reminding himself of what he went through during the war years. Unbelievable man. And, it was just something to see. I didn't, I never took up the challenge to go with him, because number one, I couldn't keep up with him. He'd done this, for 5 years in the forest during World War II. And he was an older man, but he still had the koach. He was a very interesting person. So the fact is that, going back to the psukim over here, we've got now the question, and Bilski was one of the big stories. How did they survive in terms of food? They were always very reluctant to take more people into the group, because how are they going to feed them? They're in the middle of a forest. You can't, you can't get to access to supplies the way we do. Can't go to Yochanan. So it's a question mark. So here again, David has got now 600 men. Unbelievable. They managed to get out of the city. Doesn't say how. I suspect they dug a tunnel under the wall, or they put ladders over the wall. I mean, who knows, right? But the 600 men managed to escape. And Saul was told that David had escaped, and he didn't bother coming. Right? So everything that was predicted in the end never took place. So you'll say to me, did God make a mistake? The answer is, this is always the same question. The answer is, if things had gone in the normal derech, then Saul would have come and David would have been captured, but it wasn't meant to be. So again, this is all into sort of more philosophical discussion. When you have a nevuah, is a nevuah telling you what will be or what will possibly be, as opposed to what actually takes place? And that's again a very interesting debate for a different class, philosophy 101. But we'll come back to this story. Listen to this. So David managed to get out. Pasuk Yudalet. Vayeshev David bamidbar b'matzadot. So he found some sort of place to hide, called matzadot. Now what that is, I mean, this is the word masada that we know. So it's not necessarily a building, it's just a high place, right? When you, as I said, you're on the bus and you've gone past Ein Gedi, and Masada is on the right when you're going down to Eilat. That's the next stop. And that's the sort of place that David would have gone to hide, up the mountain somewhere. Okay, and that's where he managed to hide out. But Yeshe Bahar bin Zif, he got to the wilderness of Ziv, and he dwelt on the mountain, right? Whichever, however you survive like that. Saul kept looking for him, and he never found him. Once you're in the desert over there, you can get lost very easily, as I think maybe we know that. In the meantime, listen to this. Tedva. Vayar David ki yatsa Shaul levakesh et nafsho. Saul had still not given up the chase. David heard about it. But David b'midbar Ziv b'chorsha, and he's in the wilderness of Ziv. He's hiding in a forest. There's some sort of forest over there. Going down again, as I said, you're on the way to Eilat, so it's somewhere on the right. A forest that I remember ever seeing a forest, and we went down in January, and I don't remember seeing anything like that. But this is 2,500 years ago. Maybe there was a forest. I don't know. But listen to this. Ted Zayin. Vayakam Yonatan ben Shaul. Now here comes Jonathan. Now Jonathan knows, and he's already had this issue with David. Number one, they took their leave of each other, a very emotional farewell. On the other hand, they knew that they would meet up again. But Jonathan is now committed to his father. Jonathan had this terrible dilemma. Who do I support? Do I support David? Do I support Shaul? And the father-son relationship was just overpowering for him. And he supported his father. However, he never lost that sense of connection to David. And he's now heard that David is somewhere in Midbar Ziv. For some reason, he has ability, not quite sure how, to find him, because Shaul can't find him. That Jonathan does, and he goes. Vayelech el David chorshen. He knows he's in the forest, somewhere in that wilderness. Vayechazek et yado be'Elohim, and he strengthened his hand, says Rashi, chidesh berit shebineh. He renews the covenant. In other words, maybe at this point, David was feeling let down by Jonathan, because Saul is chasing David the whole time, and maybe Jonathan is not supporting or trying to stop his father from doing this. So Jonathan comes especially, think about that. He's going to David, and look at the reaction his father may have to him. His father may turn around and say to Jonathan, how can you support the rebel? And in a fit of madness, he's always throwing spears. He'll throw another spear at Jonathan. But Jonathan doesn't care, because he knows it's the right thing to do. And these are two very principled individuals. David went to fight the Plishtim, even though he was taking a big risk. And now Jonathan is taking an equally big risk trying to help David. At least to give him some, what we call in Hebrew, chizuk, strength. Listen to this. It's such a beautiful story. Vayakam Yonatan ben Shaul, vayelech el David chorsha. He went to David, vaychazek et yado be'Elohim, and he strengthened his hand through God. In other words, renewed the covenant. Vayomer elav al tira. Wow. How did he know David was afraid? There's this fantastic friendship going on here. You know, you just sense it. He sensed that David was fearful, right? Because at the end of the day, Shaul is still powerful. But Jonathan says, don't be afraid. Ki lo timtza'akot yad Shaul avi. My father will never find you. I managed to find you, but my father will never find you. Wow. Again, that's a bit of a commitment, even though it's, how does he know that his father won't find him? He's got 3,000 scouts, right, running around looking for David. So how's he not going to find him? But Jonathan says, you hear the words, and it's obviously to calm David down. Is this for real, or is this a calming sentence? I always saw it as more of an effort to calm David down, right? Because if he's afraid, he'll start making mistakes. Listen to this. And he said, and here comes something so precious. Yonatan says, I know in the end you're going to be the new king. And I know that I should be the new king, and I'm not going to be the new king. Because who takes over from Saul? It should be Yonatan. If Saul is going to be killed or whatever, Yonatan will take over. But he now says to David, I know you're going to be the new king. I would be prepared at this point to be your deputy, right? As they say, what is it called? The first lady, the first gentleman, the second lady, the second gentleman, right? The terms that we know from the States. He's prepared to be the vice president. Right, in the American elections, nobody wants to be the vice president. I mean, they have this debate, but everybody said it's non-consequential. Though I think we're now in a position where the vice president is a bit more consequential than maybe they were in the past. But whatever. The reality is, you don't want to be the vice president. But says Yonatan to David, I will even be. Look what he says here. V'anochi elecha lemishneh. I'll be your number 2. Wow. V'gam Shaul avi yodea ke. And my father knows this. And in other words, it may not be with his blessing, but he knows this is a potential outcome of what's going on here. And that was the conversation, to give David chizuk. David was worried about his men, so he gave them strength. Yonatan is worried about David, so he gives David strength. These are fantastic human beings. In the middle of a war situation, they're giving each other strength. My grandson was here last year for Bar Mitzvah, so where did they go? They went to was it Chashmonayim or was it Netzach Yehuda? Where did they go? The Haredi army base. Netzach Yehuda on Hanukkah. And he went to be with the soldiers over there, Hanukkah, lighting candles. And I'm not sure who gave more chizuk to whom. Was it my grandson giving them chizuk because he'd come from America to have his bar mitzvah with them, and they danced with him and they sang and they had a barbecue. I mean, sort of limited barbecue, wasn't it? Some food down there. And on the other hand, they gave my grandson an experience which I'll never forget for the rest of his life. So this is what we're talking about today. This is such an important thing in the army, that we experience the idea of supporting each other, giving each other strength. And where does it come from? Where is it in our DNA? It's from David and Yonatan. What a fantastic revelation this is. It should be obvious, but in some armies, I mean, I don't believe for 1 minute that the Russian army give each other strength. At the moment, you read some of the stories of what's going on in the Ukraine. It's appalling, beyond appalling. It's terrible, terrible events. And here we know that our whole DNA is about supporting each other. Where does that come from? We just learned about it. David, Yonatan, and essentially what's going on between them. Amazing. And even David's men, who are not necessarily the greatest examples of loyal people, they were with him because maybe they were thrown out of their yeshiva, whatever they were. The reality was David worries for them. He gives them strength. Right? Incredible. This is an amazing man. And they make a covenant again, which in those days, I don't know, different ways of doing a covenant like we read in the Bible. And essentially what it means, David stayed in the forest, Jonathan went home, got on the bus and went back to Jerusalem. Wow. Or near Jerusalem, where Saul was living. El Shaul. In the meantime, the people who were in Midbar Ziph, remember he's moved from Keilah to Ziph. The people who represented these, what they call Ziphim, men of Ziph, they went Hagivata, they sent a delegation back to where Shaul was living, Lemor, to say, hello, David Mistate Imanu. We can tell you, David is hiding amongst us, right? Which again is so disturbing, because this is what Doeg did. At the end of the day, Doeg spilled the beans on David initially by saying he's in Nob, and then Saul turns up with the army and with Doeg, etc., and they kill the Kohanim. So the men of Ziv are doing essentially the same thing. It's an example in the Bible of how destructive Lashon Hara can really be. And that in itself is a bit of Musa, but I don't do Musa. So just hear it from the verses. And it says like this: Imonu b'mitzadot b'chorsha. David is with us in these high places in forest over there. B'givat hachila, it's the hill of Hachila, another place, a name. Asher mimin Shimon, which was to the south of the Shimon. Shimon literally means a desolate wasteland. Wow. Now, Pasachah ve'atar chol avat nafshecha melech loredet raid. Come, O King, come down with us, as they used to say on the TV, come on down, literally, V'lanu hasgiru biyad hamelech, and we will help you to capture David. They were so petrified of the reaction of the king against them, if he would blame them for harboring David, that they volunteered to do the dirty work. Like Doeg, it's Doeg number 2. Vayomer Shaul, and Shaul is overwhelmed. Surprisingly, even though, again, is this Shaul in control or is this Shaul a little bit out of control? Let you make up your own mind. He says, Baruchim atem Lashem, hi chamaltem alai. You're blessed because you had Rahmanas on me. Wow, not really what we expect the king to say. Normally I would expect the king to say, you're blessed because you're going to help me. But to say chamaltem, chemla, means to have pity upon me. Right? But again, this is the mindset of King Saul. Listen to this story. Pasuk Kafpet. L'chuna achinu od u'de'uru et makomo asher tiyeh raglo. Go back and do your investigation. Find out where David is. Ki mira osham, who saw him there. Ki amar elai arom yarimhu, because I know he's very tricky. The king realized, and this is not a statement made by a man who's not thinking straight. He knows that David is very elusive, and he says so. So he says to the men of Ziv, go back, find him, let me know where he is, and I'll come and pick him up. And he says, see and know. In other words, take it literally, internalize what you are doing. Mikol machbuim asher yitchabei sham, all the hiding places. Okay, if you have kids in Gun, they'll know about machbuim, hide and seek. V'shavtem elai al nachon, and come back and report to me. V'alachti itchem, and then I will follow you. V'yayim yeshnu ba'aretz, hichpasti oto b'chol afei Yehuda. I will look for him in all of the places of Yehuda, wherever the thousands of Yehuda are to be found. Eventually, I will find David and I will kill him. Wow. It's pretty intense. Pasuk Chof Dalet. Vayokumu vayelchu Zifa lifnei Shaul. They went to Ziph before Shaul. But David v'anashav b'nbam Ma'on b'arava. David has already moved to another wilderness. It's called the wilderness of Ma'on. El Yemina Shimon, again in the same direction with Yishimon on the right. This place called Yishimon. Vayelech Shaul v'anashav levakesh. These people of Shaul went to seek him. V'yagidu David v'yerid asela v'yeshem midbar Ma'on. David had to move to the wilderness of Ma'on. V'yishma Shaul v'yedov achrei David midbar Ma'on, and he chased David to this wilderness of Ma'on. This is breakneck. Don't realize how intense this whole drama really is. David is literally being chased, you say, from pillar to post, in such a way that he runs out of the building from one side, and Shaul is coming in from this is like in the movies. They almost got him. The Fugitive, you remember that TV show? They almost got the guy, and then the guy moves on, and they don't catch him. It's one of those unbelievable, crazy stories. We'll just get to the end of the chapter. V'yelech Shaul. So Shaul goes mitzad har mizeh, v'David hansham mitzad har mizeh. There's kind of a symmetry between the two groups. Saul is one group on one side of the mountain, David's on the other side of the mountain. That's how close it got. Literally 2 hills, and they're on both sides. Probably couldn't see each other, because the mountains in between. And David had to rush. He had to run for his life. But Shaul v'anashav otrim. La'atob means a terror, to crown, to surround. Saul was surrounding El David and Ashav the Tafsam. He wanted to grab them. At this point, Hashem makes an appearance. Unbelievable. God decides, this is the drama of this story. Fantastic story. Hashem sends a malach because Saul needs to be stopped. He's on the verge of catching David, on the verge of killing him. And if Saul kills David, we've got a bit of a problem about Mashiach, to put it mildly. So what's going to be? Look at this. Pasuk Kafsa. It's a fantastic story. Umalach ba el Shaul lemad, an angel. Some say it was a messenger. Rashi says it's a malach. I think he says min hashamayim. Malach mamash kedei latzil et David. It's a real angel.
Unlike Metsuda, who says it was just ordinary military scout.
Somebody, a scout. I love the concept that it's a real angel. Right? Maybe dressed in human clothing, like we have with the story of the three angels with Avraham Avinu. I don't know, but the fact that Hashem kind of, because at the end of the day, God is Kaviyach, if you can say such a thing, is out on a limb, because He's told us that that at the end of the day, the people are going to come for David, but we know that there's a promise that David's got to be the king. So this becomes a little bit complicated if Shaul is going to arrive at David's door and kill him. So God intervenes here. This is one of the examples you can have, again, another philosophical discussion, the intervention of God in history. But this is a very crucial moment. Pasuk Kav Zayin, this chapter is unbelievable. Umalach ba el Shaul lemor, the messenger comes, the angel, Maharav alecha ki pashtu plishtim al haaretz. Saul, stop. You've got a problem with the plishtim again. They're back. And if they're back, you've got to go and deal with it. Vayoshav Shaul miradov achrei David. So he said, all right, I'll put David on the back burner. I'll go and deal with the plishtim. This was the place where Saul turns around, is known as the Rock of Division. So the rabbis have a big discussion. What exactly is this Rock of Division? And I'll just read to you a little bit of the note that I sent out, which again is kind of interesting. The Sela Machlokot, right? And what exactly is going on over here? It says that we saw that Shaul was very amazed by the incredible loyalty of the people, which, as I said, is a good sign that they did not consider him to be crazy, because they wouldn't be so loyal to him. But it says, this is a quote, I think, from the where is it coming from? From Midrash Tehillim. Listen to this. I'm glad that Rhonda's not here. She would not appreciate this. But it's a good quote. It says, "Vayalu zifim el Shaul." Remember, we saw that these people of Ziph went to Shaul. Says the Midrash, Zeh shama katuv mashol makshiv al davar sheke kol misharatav v'shoim. What does that mean? Kivan shara Zifim l'Shaul shaya mateh ozno lishma loshen hara al David. The men of Ziph realized Saul was open to loshen hara. It's pretty sad. Hayu ba'im v'omrim lo. They said to him, Lo notnu da'atam. And they ignored Masha Katuv B'Torah, where the Torah says clearly, Arur Makei Re'eu Baseta. If you smite a person in secret, and that means not just physical hitting, but by speaking against them, you're cursed. This is a pasuk in Sefer Devarim. What did they decide, these men of Ziv? Shaul gave them a blessing. Instead of a curse, Shaul tried to placate them by saying, you're not going to be cursed for what you did, you're going to be blessed. That's why he says Bruchim. But it's so interesting. And then, but the Medrash says, but they're cursed because they said, and Moshe Rabbeinu had already said, you're going to be cursed for doing what you did. Hinei Elokim azarli Hashem b'samchi nafshi. And David expresses it in Tehillim, as he does in so many different ways, that in the end of the day, if it wasn't for the support of God, I would have been done for. Unbelievable. Just one comment about Yonatan, which is so beautiful on this paper that I sent out. This is from a sefer, was printed not so long ago. Eliyahu Yedid, who's again another Tanakh teacher in Yerushalayim. He says, he quotes here from the Gemara Bava Metzia, Shlosha amvatanim heim. 3 people had extreme humility. And you would think number 1 was Moshe Rabbeinu. He says, no, this is the Gemara. Who were the 3 people? There was number 1, a rabbi of the Talmud called Abba, Rabbi Shimon ben Gamliel, one of the family of the Gamliel family, one of the family of the Nasi, of the Prince of Israel. And then the second people who were very humble was Bnei B'Terah, whole discussion about them in another Gemara. And the third example of humility, Yonatan ben Shaul. Wow. And that's the Gemara statement. Why is he a good example of humility? Says the Gemara, the Ka'amar le David v'ata timloch Yisrael. You'll be the king, v'anochi elecha lemishneh, and I'll be your vice president. He's prepared to accept that David would run the show. That is extreme, incredible expression of humility. And this is Yonatan. As I said, Yonatan is to me the one that we don't score high enough in our estimation. We give David incredible reputation. We give Saul whatever reputation we want to give him, and try to understand how sad it was that he lost the plot so badly. And at the same time, Yonatan, who is so special, Look at the characters that the midot that we've learnt about, the caring for each other, the fact that Yonatan goes out of his way, puts himself in danger because his father's going to go berserk when he finds out, potentially, and he still is prepared to go and say to David, "I'm here. I want to renew our covenant. I want to help you." And then David looks after his men who are surrounded, and he says to them in no uncertain terms, "We've got to get out of here. Exit stage left. Let's get out of here as soon as we can," because he realizes that if they all stay, they're all going to be killed. Unbelievable. And again, we're talking about tzaddikim here. What you're going to see in the next chapter, and this is the chapter where, you probably need to do a tiyul before we learn this chapter and go down to En Gedi. Because chapter 24, wouldn't it be nice? Go down to En Gedi, go to the waterfall. I was there 35 years ago, I think, last time I was there. You do this long walk. Those who have not been there, massively long walk to get, well, it seemed a long walk, probably not so far. And then you get to the waterfall in the middle of the desert. And then when you realize, you read chapter 24, Mitzvah Hashem, we will in 2 weeks' time, you realize this is the same place. It's all about the animals. You see those gazelles or ibex or whatever they're called climbing up sideways up the hill. They're still doing it. And you read it in the Bible here with David HaMelech, and you realize, wow, nothing's changed. It's the desert. They're still climbing up the hill the way they do. How they find food over there, the animals, I really don't know, but they do. And it's a biblical scene, and it's still there. It's beautiful. It's beyond beautiful. So Bezrat Hashem next time, and again, I want to just emphasize the characters of these individuals. And we're going to see next time, as I said, this is in chapter 24, the first interaction after all of this madness is going on between David and Shaul. He cuts the corner of his cloak. He says, King Saul, "O king, I'm here," bows down. Saul says to him, "Wow, you didn't kill me? You had the chance to kill me." And David says so beautifully, and he's crying buckets of tears. He says to Saul, he says, "Abba, Avi," calls him my father. And again, he's his father-in-law, but to him, Shaul is like a father to him. He feels that. He says, "I couldn't kill you. How could I kill the Mashiach Hashem?" That's what he calls it. You're the anointed, the first king of Israel. You want me to come with a knife and kill you? Really? I couldn't even imagine. And his men are going berserk because David's men want David to get rid of the enemy. And they feel that Saul is the enemy. No, for David, it's not true. It's not like that. Again, I'm just overwhelmed by this. The incredible, and of course, unfortunately, we have the DNA. And what happens today? They take advantage of it. As I said, we help them and they throw it back in our faces. The enemy. Very difficult. It doesn't in any way belittle the way that we are behaving in the world. Thank God we do set a moral example. We just had Mamad HaSinai. Why is there so much anti-Semitism? Rabbis all say the same idea. Sinai, Sinah. They hate us because of what we did at Mount Sinai. We gave the world morality. We told them, you're not animals, you're human beings. You've got to behave in a certain way. And they didn't like it. And they still don't like it. Right? They want to be behemoths. They want to behave in whatever way they want. And we come along, we just celebrated Shavuot, which I hope everybody had a great Shavuot. And Bezrat Hashem will continue to learn about these really beautiful people. Very, very special. And as I said at the beginning, let's hope this will be a zechut for David, that's also one of the beautiful people, and he should be well. Everybody, have a wonderful, wonderful, what we call in England, fortnight, till the next year. For the Americans, 2 weeks' time.